You are a very wicked man. You left me working under the hot sun with this pregnancy while you eat under the shade.
You forced yourself into my life. I never wanted to marry you.
Ah, you will not believe the story I am about to tell you. This one is hotter than freshly fried yam. Meet Adaeze, the girl who decided she wanted the village's most handsome man, Obinna, and she was ready to do everything to get him, even if it meant washing his mother's clothes before her own, cooking like a five-star chef, and working harder than a goat in the harmattan. Before we dive in, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and drop a comment below. Trust me, you do not want to miss how this crazy story unfolds. Adaeze woke up that morning to the rooster's crow, as loud and stubborn as always. The sun had barely kissed the rooftops of Umukoro village, yet she was already on her feet, brushing her long hair and tying it neatly behind her. Her mirror was a small piece of polished metal, and she stared at her reflection, adjusting the wrap around her waist. Today, I will look perfect, she whispered to herself. Obinna will notice me today, I swear, Obinna. Even saying his name made her heart beat faster. The village's most handsome man, with broad shoulders, smooth skin, and a smile that could make the river pause mid-flow. Wealthy, proud, and completely unaware that anyone other than himself existed. Adaeze had watched him since she was a girl, and over time, she had built a million little plans on how to win his heart. Every morning, every afternoon, every evening, she found herself looking for him, studying the way he walked, how he laughed, the tilt of his head when he spoke to his friends, Obi. She called softly one afternoon when he was talking to his friends under the big Iroko tree. She hid behind a basket of yams, peeking out. Obi laughed at something one of his friends said, tossing his head back in that careless, confident way. Adaeze felt a pang in her chest. She whispered under her breath, "If only I could be the one making you laugh like that." She practiced it too. Every morning, while fetching water from the stream, she practiced the tilt of her head, the shy smile, the perfect laugh. She imagined him noticing her, stepping closer, telling her how beautiful she was. Sometimes, she caught herself talking to the reflection in the water, practicing what she would say. "Good morning, Obi," she said softly one day, almost tripping over a stone. You look very strong today, and handsome." As usual, she blushed at the sound of her own voice. Adaeze's mother, Ngozi, noticed her wandering and staring far too often. "Adaeze," she called, shaking a basket of peppers, "you are always looking at that boy. Come help me grind these peppers before they spoil." "I'm coming, Mama," Adaeze said. Not taking her eyes off the horizon, she muttered under her breath, "I'll help you later, just one more glance." Obinna was unaware of the attention. He walked through the village proudly, greeting everyone with a casual wave, tossing a little charm of his smile here and there, and not once looking at Adaeze, who was hiding behind cassava leaves, hoping he would notice her. Sometimes she wondered if he would ever see her the way she saw him. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she tried something bold. She adjusted the wrapper she wore to make it look neat and strong, tied her hair in a braid that fell over her shoulder, and walked past him near the stream. Her heart pounded like a drum. Obi glanced at her, just slightly, and she froze. For a whole minute, her world stopped. He looked at her and then, without even a second thought, returned to talking with his friends. Adaeze walked away, pretending not to notice, but she whispered to herself, "One day, Obi, you will see me. One day, you will want me." She went home that evening and sat near the fire, thinking and planning. She would help him, she decided. She would wash his clothes, cook for him, even farm for him if she had to. She would do everything so that he could not resist her. She smiled softly to herself, feeling the fire of determination warm her from the inside. Obinna will be mine, she said, almost laughing quietly, and I don't care how long it takes. The moon rose over Mukoro village, and Adaeze stayed awake, staring at the stars, imagining a life where she and Obinna were together. In her mind, she saw herself cooking for him, laughing with him, maybe even holding his hand one day. Every detail was perfect. Every word she would say, every smile she would give, everything she would do, it all existed in her imagination, and in that quiet night, with the village sleeping on her, Adaeze made a silent promise. She would make Obinna notice her. She would make him love her, even if she had to give all her strength, all her heart, and all her patience to do it. The river was already busy when Adaeze arrived that morning. Women knelt along the banks, scrubbing clothes against smooth stones, their voices rising and falling with laughter and gossip. Adaeze chose a spot close to the water, rolled up her wrapper, and placed the large bundle of clothes beside her. They were heavy, soaked with dirt and sweat, most of them belonging to Obinna and his mother. She dipped her hands into the cool water and began to scrub. Her fingers moved fast at first, but soon the pain returned. The skin on her hands was rough and cracked, and every rub against the stones sent a sharp sting through her palms. She winced slightly, then forced a smile onto her face. The sun rose higher, and its light reflected on the water, flashing into her eyes. Sweat gathered on her forehead and rolled slowly down her cheeks, mixing with the river water splashing up from her work. "Ah, Adaeze," one woman said, shaking her head. "You are here again." Adaeze laughed softly without looking up. "Where else should I be?" Another woman leaned closer. "These clothes are plenty." "Are they all yours?" Adaeze paused for a second, then shook her head. "No. They are Obinna's and his mother's." There was a brief silence, then murmurs spread like ripples in the water. "Every day," one young girl asked in disbelief. "Every day," Adaeze replied, scrubbing harder, as if the stone had offended her. Her arms ached, her shoulders burned. But she kept smiling. In her mind, she pictured Obinna wearing the clean clothes, smelling fresh. Proud. That thought made the pain feel smaller, at least for a moment. "Does he ever come here to help you?" another woman asked. Adaeze shook her head quickly. "Men do not wash clothes," she said. Laughing again. "It is women's work." The women exchanged looks. One of them sighed. "This is not sacrifice. This is suffering." Adaeze pretended not to hear. She lifted another cloth, twisted it hard, and slapped it against the stone. The sound echoed. Her hands trembled slightly, but she ignored it. The sun now set directly above her, beating down on her back. Her wrapper was damp with sweat, clinging to her skin. Still, she smiled. A younger friend, Iphigenia, knelt beside her. "Adaeze," she said quietly, "you work too much. Today it is washing. Tomorrow it will be something else. When do you rest?" Adaeze glanced at her and smiled, tired, but hopeful. "Rest will come later." "When?" Iphigenia pressed. "When everything works out," Adaeze replied. The women watched her hands closely. They were swollen, red, and trembling now. Small cuts were visible along her fingers. "Look at her hands," one woman whispered. "They look like an old woman's hands. She is young, but she is aging herself," another replied. Adaeze heard the words clearly this time. Her smile faltered for just a second. She looked down at her hands, then quickly back at the water. She dipped them again and continued scrubbing. It will be worth it, she said aloud, more to herself than to anyone else. Love needs patience. The river kept flowing uncaring. The sunlight glinted off the water, off the sweat on her face, off the tears she refused to acknowledge, bound her. Women finished their laundry and left one by one, but Adaeze remained, scrubbing, rinsing, smiling. To anyone watching, she looked strong and devoted. Only the river saw how tired she truly was, and how much of herself she was slowly washing away. Adaeze did not wait for an invitation, and she did not ask for permission. One early morning, when the mist was still sitting low on the ground and the village was quiet, she wrapped her cloth tightly round her waist, tied her scarf neatly, and walked straight into Obinna's compound as if her feet had always known the way. She stood for a moment, looking around. The compound was messy. Dry leaves were scattered everywhere, plates from the night before lay near the wall, and the ground looked like it had not been swept in days. Adaeze smiled softly. To her, this was not dirt. It was opportunity. She dropped her basket, picked up a broom, and began to sweep. She swept slowly at first, then faster, pushing the sand away with purpose. Her arms moved in steady rhythm, and sweat quickly formed on her forehead. She did not stop. In her mind, she imagined Obinna stepping out, seeing her, and thinking, "This girl cares about me?" That thought alone gave her strength. When Obinna finally came out of his room, stretching and yawning, he stopped suddenly. He said, "Adaeze, what are you doing here?" She quickly lowered her eyes and smiled. "Good morning, Obi. I passed by and saw the compound was dirty. I said let me help small." Obinna shrugged and sat on a stool. "If you like," he said casually, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Adaeze's heart leaped. He did not send her away. That was enough. From that day, she made herself useful in every way she could. When Obinna went to the farm, Adaeze followed. She carried heavy loads on her head, her neck aching, her back burning, but she never complained. She cleared weeds before Obinna arrived, tilled the soil deeper than required, and planted more than anyone asked her to. Obinna often leaned on his hoe, watching her. "You work too much," he said once. She laughed lightly. "Work is good. It keeps the body strong." He nodded, satisfied, and went to sit under a tree while she continued alone. Soon, it was not just Obinna she served. His mother, Amaka, noticed her presence and quickly grew comfortable with it. One morning, Amaka dropped a large bundle of dirty clothes in front of Adaeze. "Wash these first," she said. "My son's clothes must be clean." "Yes, Mama Amaka," Adaeze replied immediately, already rolling up her sleeves. She did not argue. She did not hesitate. That same morning, at her own home, her mother Ngozi waited with a basket of clothes. The sun climbed higher, and Adaeze did not return. When she finally came back late in the evening, her clothes wet from the river, her hands rough and red, Ngozi looked at her quietly. "Adaeze," she said, "you left my clothes untouched." Adaeze avoided her eyes. "Mama, forgive me. Amaka needed me today. I will wash yours tomorrow." Ngozi sighed deeply. "My daughter, do not forget where you are coming from." Adaeze nodded but did not answer. Her mind was already elsewhere. Cooking became another way she inserted herself into Obinna's life. She learned how he liked his food, how much salt, how much pepper, how thick the soup should be. Sometimes she tasted it and rushed back to add more seasoning. "Is it good?" she asked one afternoon. Watching his face closely, he ate silently, then said, "It's fine." That single word filled her chest with joy. She washed his clothes at the river from morning till afternoon, scrubbing until her fingers burned. Women passing by whispered, "Is she his wife already?" One asked. "No," another replied. "She is working herself into marriage." Adaeze heard them and smiled to herself. She believed sacrifice would surely turn into love. Slowly, she stopped prioritizing her own home. If Ngozi called her, she delayed. If Amaka shouted, she ran. If Obinna needed food, she cooked. If he needed clean clothes, she washed. If he needed help on the farm, she bent her back. She told herself it would all be worth it. One evening, as she served Obinna his meal, Amaka nodded approvingly. "This girl knows how to take care of a man," she said. Adaeze lowered her head, hiding her smile. Inside her, hope burned brightly. She believed she was getting closer. She believed love could be earned through service. And so day after day, without rest and without doubt, Adaeze continued to give Obinna everything she had: her time, her strength, and her devotion, slowly fading from her own life while trying to build herself into his. Adaeze and her mother, Ngozi, were returning from the farm that afternoon when the sun set heavily in the sky. The heat pressed against their backs, and the path home was long and dusty. Adaeze walked ahead, carrying a heavy bundle of firewood on her head. Her neck ached. Her legs trembled slightly, but she said nothing. Ngozi followed behind her, slower, breathing deeply as she leaned on her walking stick. "My daughter," Ngozi said softly, breaking the silence, "rest small. The load is heavy." "I'm fine, Mama," Adaeze replied, adjusting the firewood. "It is not too much." They walked a little further when Adaeze suddenly slowed down. Ahead of them, coming from the opposite direction, was Amaka, Obinna's mother. She too was carrying firewood, but hers looked lighter, ranged neatly on her head. The moment Adaeze saw her, her heart skipped. Her steps stopped completely. Ngozi noticed. "Why have you stopped?" she asked, confused. Adaeze did not answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on Amaka, who was now closer. In Adaeze's mind, thoughts rushed like water. "She must not see me walking while she struggles," she thought. "What if she thinks I don't respect her? What if she reports me to Obinna?" Without another word, Adaeze carefully lowered the firewood from her head and placed it into Ngozi's hands. Ngozi staggered slightly from the sudden weight. "Adaeze," she exclaimed. "What are you doing?" This wood is heavy, but Adaeze had already turned away. She rushed forward, smiling brightly as she approached Amaka. "Mama, Amaka," she greeted warmly. "Good afternoon, Mama." Amaka stopped and looked at her. "Good afternoon. Where are you coming from?" "From the farm, Mama," Adaeze said quickly. "Let me help you with that." Before Amaka could respond, Adaeze gently lifted the firewood from her head and placed it on her own. She straightened up proudly, ignoring the pain shooting through her neck. "Oh," Amaka said, pleased, "you are a good girl. You are very respectful." Adaeze smiled wider. "It is nothing, Mama. Please allow me." Behind them, Ngozi stood still on the path, struggling to balance the heavier load. She watched her daughter walk away with Amaka, her back straight, her steps eager. "Adaeze," Ngozi called out softly. "My daughter." Adaeze paused for a brief second. She turned halfway, saw her mother standing alone with the firewood, and hesitation flickered in her eyes. But then Amaka cleared her throat. "Let us go," Amaka said. "The sun is too hot." "Yes, Mama," Adaeze replied immediately, and she continued walking. Ngozi swallowed hard and adjusted the firewood on her head. Her hands trembled slightly. "So this is how it is now," she murmured to herself. a mother can be left behind. As Adaeze walked beside Amaka, she laughed softly and asked questions. Pretending not to hear her mother anymore. Was the farm stressful today, Mama? She asked. Not too much, Amaka replied. But this old body gets tired easily. That is why I am here, Adaeze said quickly. You should not stress yourself, Amaka smiled, satisfied. Any woman who wants to marry my son must know how to respect elders. Adaeze's heart jumped at those words. Yes, Mama, she said, her voice filled with hope. Behind them, Ngozi continued alone, each step heavier than the last. She stopped once, wiped sweat from her face, and looked ahead at her daughter walking proudly beside another woman. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. One day, she whispered, "You will understand what you are doing." Adaeze did not look back again. Her focus was forward. On Amaka, on Obinna, on the future she believed she was building. She did not see her mother's pain. All she saw was approval, and to her, that approval felt more important than anything else. The village festival came with drums, laughter, and the smell of roasted meat floating in the air. Palm wine flowed freely, poured from large calabashes into waiting cups. And people danced as if worries did not exist. Adaeze stood among them, smiling, clapping. But her mind was far away. She watched Obinna from across the open square. He sat proudly with other men, laughing loudly, already holding a cup of palm wine. The sight made her heart beat faster. Tonight, she thought, everything must change. She moved closer. Step by careful step, carrying a small calabash of palm wine in her hands. Her palms were sweaty. Not from the heat, but from the decision she had made earlier that day. She had sat alone under a tree, thinking, remembering all her sacrifices, all her waiting. If I continue like this, she had whispered, nothing will happen. That was when the plan entered her mind, bold and frightening. If he will not choose me, I will make myself impossible to ignore. Obi, she said softly now, standing before him. You have not tasted this one. It is very sweet. Obinna looked up, surprised. Another one, he laughed. You want to finish me today, she smiled shyly. Festival comes once in a while. Drink. He took the cup and drank deeply. She watched his throat move, her fingers tightening round the calabash. Good, he said, handing the cup back. Adaeze quickly poured more. Small more, he shrugged. Why not, cup after cup, she refilled it. Each time, she laughed, touched his arm lightly, stayed close. The drums grew louder, the night darker. Obinna's laughter became slower, heavier. You are enjoying today, he said, squinting at her. Adaeze nodded. I am happy seeing you happy. Clouds gathered overhead. Thick and dark. A distant rumble of thunder rolled through the sky. As the first drops of rain fell, people began to scatter, grabbing children and belongings. Rain, someone shouted. Obinna stood unsteadily. Let us move, he said. Adaeze stepped closer. Your place is near. Let us go before the rain becomes heavy. By the time they reached his hut, the rain was falling hard, drenching them completely. Thunder cracked loudly, and lightning lit up the night. They stood at the doorway, breathing fast. Water dripped from Adaeze's hair down her face. She looked up at him, her eyes shining, her chest rising and falling quickly. Sit, she said softly, guiding him inside. Obinna laughed again. This rain is wicked. The door closed behind them. The storm roared outside, rain beating against the roof. Inside, the air felt heavy, tense. Adaeze's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She stepped closer, her voice shaking. Obi, she said, do you know how long I have taken care of you? He frowned slightly, trying to focus. Adaeze, what is this? Tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. I have given you everything, she said. Please, look at me. She moved closer still, her hands trembling as she touched his chest. The thunder struck again, loud and sudden. Obinna pulled back in surprise. Stop, he said softly. What are you doing? I am tired of waiting, she whispered. I want you to see me, just me. And that moment, fear and hope collided inside her. The rain grew heavier, the night darker. She leaned into him, desperate, driven by months of silence and longing. He froze at first, then the palm wine clouded his thoughts. The storm outside swallowed the world, leaving only the sound of rain and their uneven breathing. Morning came quietly. The rain had stopped, and soft light entered the room. Adaeze woke first. Her head ached, but her heart felt strangely light. She looked at Obinna sleeping beside her and smiled. Now he will love me, she thought. Now he must. Weeks later, when her body began to change, the truth became clear. She held her stomach one morning and laughed softly, tears streaming down her face. It worked, she whispered. It worked. When she told Obinna, his face hardened with shock. Pregnant? He asked sharply. Yes, she replied, smiling. It is ours. Adaeze believed the child had sealed her place in his life. She believed love had finally chosen her. But behind Obinna's silence, behind his distant eyes, the audience could already feel that the storm had not ended. It had only begun. The news of the pregnancy spread through the village faster than harmattan fire. Whispers followed Adaeze wherever she went. Some women shook their heads, some sighed, others smiled knowingly. When Obinna was finally confronted by his family, he sat quietly, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the ground. So it has reached this level, Amaka said, folding her arms. The girl is pregnant. Obinna said nothing. Are you deaf? Amaka continued. People are already talking. Do you want shame in this family? After a long silence, Obinna sighed. What do you want me to do? You will marry her, Amaka replied firmly. Immediately, Adaeze was sent for. She stood before them, her hands folded, her heart racing. When she heard the words, her eyes filled with tears. You mean marriage? She asked softly. Yes, Amaka said. Prepare yourself. Adaeze nodded quickly. Thank you, Mama. Thank you. She turned to Obinna, her face glowing with hope. Obi, thank you. Obinna looked away. Let us just do what must be done, he said flatly. The wedding was small and quiet. No big celebration, no loud joy, just elders, palm wine, and traditions completed quickly. Adaeze smiled through everything. As Obinna tied the cloth around her waist, she whispered, This is the beginning. He did not answer. That night, as she sat in her new home, Adaeze felt peace wash over her. She touched her stomach and smiled. Now he will love me, she thought. Now I am his wife. The next morning, she woke before dawn. She swept the compound, fetched water, and cooked his favorite soup. When Obinna woke up, the food was already waiting. Good morning, my husband, she said brightly. He grunted and sat down to eat. He ate quietly, finished everything, and pushed the plate aside. Is it good? Adaeze asked. Watching his face, It is okay, he replied. She smiled. Tomorrow, I will add more meat. Days passed, and her hope stayed strong. She believed love was slow, that marriage would soften him. Even with her growing belly, she worked harder. She cooked, cleaned, washed clothes, and cared for Amaka. Obinna, meanwhile, sat under the tree, ate, slept, and waited. One afternoon, Adaeze placed food before him again. "You are late," he said. "I was tired today," she replied gently. "The baby excuses," he interrupted. "Food should not be late in this house." Another day, he tasted the soup and frowned. "This is too salty. I'm sorry." Adaeze said quickly, "I will do better." She noticed small things. He never said thank you. He never asked how she felt. When she rested, he complained. When she worked, he watched. Still, she smiled, holding onto hope. At night, she lay beside him, imagining a future where he would change. He will come around, she told herself. Marriage takes time. But as Obinna turned his back to her, eating her food, criticizing her effort, sitting idle while she struggled, the cracks began to show. Adaeze's smile stayed, but the warmth behind it slowly faded. And though she did not yet understand it, love was not growing in that house. Something darker was quietly taking its place. Adaeze's days began before the sky showed any color. Long before the rooster crowed, she was already awake, sitting up slowly so she would not disturb Obinna. Her back ached, her legs felt heavy, and her belly was growing, but she placed a hand on it and whispered, "We must be strong." Then she stood up quietly and stepped outside. She swept the compound while the ground was still cold, pushing away leaves and dust, stopping sometimes to catch her breath. After sweeping, she fetched water from the stream, the bucket cutting into her palms. When she returned, she lit the fire and began to cook. Smoke filled her eyes, but she blinked through it, stirring the pot carefully. Obinna woke later and sat outside. "Food is not ready yet," he asked, frowning. "I'm almost done," Adaeze replied gently. "Just give me small time." He clicked his tongue and leaned back. "You women like to delay things." After serving him, she washed the plates immediately, then picked up her hoe and went to the farm. The sun rose high as she bent over the soil, clearing weeds, planting, sweating. Her stomach tightened sometimes, and she paused, breathing deeply, then continued. "You should be resting," a passerby said. "If I rest, who will work?" Adaeze replied with a weak smile. By afternoon, she returned to care for Amaka. She washed her clothes, massaged her feet, cooked special meals for her. Adaeze, Amaka called, "Bring water." "Yes, Mama." "Adaeze, my wrapper is dirty." "I will wash it now, Mama." She never complained. When evening came, she cooked again, cleaned again, and prepared what she could for the child she carried. She folded tiny clothes she had sewn at night, dreaming softly. Obinna watched her move around the house and laughed. "You move like a goat," he said. She forced a smile. "I'm just tired." "Tired," he scoffed. "Women are always tired." She lay down at night with aching bones and a hopeful heart, believing if she tried harder, love would come. But Obinna slept easily, full and rested, while Adaeze stared into the darkness, holding her stomach, wondering how long her strength would last. The day Adaeze finally asked Obinna for help came quietly, without warning. It was not planned. It came from tired bones, from swollen feet, from a heart that had carried too much for too long. The sun was already high, and Adaeze had been awake since before dawn. She had cooked, cleaned, fetched water, and returned from the farm with mud still clinging to her wrapper. Her back burned, and the child in her womb shifted as if feeling her pain. Obinna sat under the tree in the compound, chewing kola nut, his legs stretched comfortably in front of him. Adaeze stood nearby, holding a heavy pot, Breathing hard, she watched him for a moment. Then gathered courage. "Obi," she said softly, "please, can you help me today?" He looked at her slowly, as if he had not heard well. "Help you with what?" he asked. "My body is tired," she replied gently. "Maybe you can help fetch water, or clear small part of the farm." There was silence. Then Obinna laughed, loud and sharp. "Help," he repeated. "Are you mad?" Adaeze swallowed. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly. Just today, Obinna's face changed. He stood up suddenly. "So now you want to turn me into a woman?" he shouted. "Is it because you are my wife now?" "No," Adaeze said quickly, fear creeping into her voice. "I'm just asking." "Shut up," he snapped. "I did not marry you to make my life hard." He kicked the stool beside him, sending it flying. "Look at you," he continued angrily. "Always complaining. Other women work without talking." Adaeze's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not complaining," she whispered. "I just need help." "You need help," he mocked. "Then go back to your father's house." The words hit her like a slap. She said nothing more. She bent down, picked up the pot, and walked away slowly. Behind her, Obinna continued grumbling, pacing round the compound, muttering insults under his breath. That night, the house was quiet. A small oil lamp flickered weakly in the corner, casting long shadows on the walls. Adaeze knelt on the floor with a rag in her hand. She scrubbed slowly, her movements heavy. The floor was already clean, but she scrubbed harder. As if trying to wash away something deeper, tears slid down her face silently. She did not wipe them away. They dropped onto the floor, mixing with sweat, disappearing into the dirt. Her shoulders shook slightly, but no sound escaped her mouth. "Please," she whispered to no one, "just small kindness." Her hands trembled as she scrubbed. Her back ached, her belly felt tight. But she did not stop. Each stroke of the rag was slow, painful, desperate. The lamp flickered again, and for a moment, the room seemed to close in on her. From the other room, Obinna snored, full and comfortable. Adaeze paused and looked toward the sound. Her eyes were red, her face wet. She pressed her hand to her mouth to stop herself from crying. Aloud, "This is marriage," she whispered bitterly. She returned to scrubbing, her tears falling freely now. The night stretched long and lonely. Sweat soaked her wrapper. Tears blurred her vision, and as Adaeze knelt on the cold floor, crying silently in the dim light, something inside her cracked, not loudly, not all at once, but enough for the pain to begin, leaving scars. It did not start all at once. It started with anger in his voice, with sharp words thrown carelessly, with eyes that looked at her as if she was a burden. Adaeze tried harder. She always did. She woke earlier, moved faster, spoke less. But no matter what she did, it was never enough. One morning, she placed a bowl of soup before Obinna. Her hands were shaking from tiredness, but she forced a smile. "Eat first," she said softly. "I will bring water." Obinna dipped his hand into the soup, tasted it, and frowned. "This soup is cold," he said. "I'm sorry," Adaeze replied quickly. "I will warm it now." Before she could pick up the bowl, he slapped it out of her hands. The soup spilled onto the floor. "Useless woman," he shouted. "Do you think I married you to suffer?" Adaeze froze. Her heart pounded loudly in her chest. "I didn't mean," as she began. Before she could finish, Obinna raised his hand and struck her arm. The sound was dull, heavy. She gasped. Stepping back, "Next time," he warned. "Do things properly." She said nothing. She bent down slowly and began to clean the spilled soup. With trembling hands, her arm throbbed where he had hit her. By evening, a dark bruise had formed, spreading slowly beneath her skin. She covered it with her wrapper and told herself it was nothing. He was just angry, she thought. It will not happen again. But it did. Each day, his standards grew harsher. If food was late, he shouted. If it was too hot, he cursed. If it was too cold, he pushed her. One afternoon, as she stirred soup over the fire, her hands shook badly. "Why are you shaking like a thief?" he asked. "I'm tired," she whispered. "Tired?" he snapped. "What do you do that makes you tired?" He grabbed her wrist roughly, squeezing until she cried out. The spoon fell from her hand into the pot. "Look at you," he said angrily. "You are weak." Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded. "I'm sorry." Later that night, she stood alone in the kitchen, trying to finish cooking. Her hands trembled as she held the spoon. Tears fell freely now, dropping into the soup. She wiped her face quickly, afraid he would see. "Please," she whispered, "just let me finish." When she served the food, her eyes were red. Obinna noticed. "Why are you crying?" he asked sharply. "I'm not," she lied. He laughed. "Even crying cannot save you." As days passed, bruises appeared more often. On her arms. On her back. Sometimes on her legs. She hid them carefully, but the pain followed her everywhere. When she fetched water, her arms ached. When she cooked, her hands shook. When she lay down at night, every movement hurt. One evening, as she prepared his meal, her hands shook so badly the spoon slipped again. "Are you doing this on purpose?" Obinna shouted. "No," she cried. "Please," he pushed her hard. She fell to the ground, clutching her stomach in fear. "Stand up," he barked. "Stop pretending." She lay there for a moment, breathing heavily, tears streaming down her face. Slowly, she stood up. Her whole body trembled. She looked at him, really looked at him, and something changed inside her. The love she had held onto so tightly felt thin, weak, like smoke slipping through her fingers. That night, alone in the dark, she examined her bruised arms under the dim lamp. Purple dot, blue dot, yellow. Her hands shook as she touched them. Tears fell silently. "This is not love," she whispered to herself. She thought of all she had given, the work, the sacrifice, the waiting. And still, she was beaten, belittled, broken. As she lay down slowly, holding her stomach, fear and clarity mixed inside her. Love alone could not sustain her. Love could not protect her. And as the pain throbbed through her body, the audience could feel it too. The breaking point was close, very close. The morning was quiet, unusually quiet, as if the village itself held its breath. Adaeze woke before the sun, the first light spilling weakly through the cracks in the window. She lay for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to Obinna's slow, even breathing. 4 years, she had allowed herself to hope. 4 years, she had believed that love, patience, and sacrifice could soften him. But last night, after yet another insult, after yet another push, she knew with certainty she could not endure any more. She rose slowly, careful not to wake him. Her body heavy with exhaustion but her heart burning with determination. She moved to the small chest where she had hidden a few clothes, a wrapped bundle of blankets, and some food. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded each garment neatly. She picked up the small bundle where her child, Chinedu, slept, his soft breaths warm against her chest. "Wake up, my son," she whispered softly, brushing his hair gently. "It is time to leave." Chinedu stirred, rubbing his eyes, but did not cry. Perhaps he sensed the urgency, the weight of her decision. Adaeze adjusted him carefully, making sure he was comfortable. She took a deep breath and glanced around the house one last time. Every corner held memories, some bitter, some sweet, but none worth staying for. She opened the door slowly. Outside, the sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The dew on the grass shimmered, and a light breeze brushed against her cheeks. Adaeze stepped forward, her bare feet brushing the cool earth. She carried Chinedu carefully in her arms, her shadow stretching long across the path, sharp and determined against the rising sun. Behind her, the compound remained silent. Obinna stood at the doorway, only half awake, yawning. Rubbing his eyes, he looked at her for a long moment. "Where are you going?" he asked finally, his voice low, almost uninterested. Adaeze did not stop. "I am going where I will not be hurt," she said, her voice steady, carrying the weight of months of pain. "I will care for my son, and I will care for myself. That is all I ask." Obinna blinked slowly, as if he had not expected her to speak so firmly. You are leaving me," he said finally, with a trace of surprise, though his expression remained calm. "Yes," Adaeze said, looking straight ahead. "I cannot live like this anymore." She turned her face slightly, letting the first rays of sunlight hit her features. Her eyes were red, her cheeks still wet with tears, but her chin was lifted. She held Chinedu close, and with each step, her determination grew. The village path stretched before her, empty except for the early morning birds. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying a sense of freedom she had not felt in years. Obinna watched silently. He did not move. He did not call after her. At first, his face was unreadable, indifferent. He watched her long shadow stretch along the path, saw the courage in her posture, the strength in her steps. He saw Chinedu clutched safely against her chest, the child he had fathered, but never truly protected. Adaeze's feet carried her steadily forward. Each step was deliberate, filled with purpose. She did not look back. The rising sun framed her figure, golden and resilient, as if the light itself acknowledged her choice. Behind her, the old life, the pain, the endless toil faded slowly, leaving only a long, determined shadow stretching toward the unknown. Obinna remained in the doorway, silent. As the sound of her steps grew fainter, the air was heavy with unsaid words, regret lingering like smoke he could not chase away. The audience felt it too. The story had reached its turning point. Adaeze had chosen herself. Adaeze had chosen her child. And in that moment, it became clear, some lessons are learned too late, and some hearts are only understood when they leave. The sun climbed higher, washing the village in light, and Adaeze walked on, carrying hope, strength, and the promise of a new life. Behind her, Obinna finally realized that the woman he had taken for granted was gone, and that some losses can not be reversed. The journey to the new village was long, dusty, and quiet, but every step Adaeze took felt lighter than the day she left Obinna's compound. She held Chinedu close, feeling his small heartbeat against her chest, and with each step, she whispered softly to him, "We are free now, my son, free to live the life we choose." The village she arrived at was small but warm. The houses were simple, made of clay and thatch, but the people were welcoming. Children ran past, laughing, dogs barked, and the smell of fresh bread and roasted yam filled the air. Adaeze found a modest hut on the edge of the village, a place she could call her own. The owner, An elderly woman named Nkem agreed to let her stay in exchange for help around the homestead. Adaeze nodded eagerly, her heart brimming with gratitude. "Thank you, Mama Nkem," Adaeze said, bowing slightly. "I will work hard and take care of everything. Don't worry." "Child," Nkem replied kindly. "Here, people take care of one another. You will be fine." The first days were hard. Adaeze learned new skills, things she had never done before. She planted a small garden: tomatoes, peppers, okra, and leafy greens. She fetched water from the nearby stream, built small fences around her crops, and learned to cook new meals with the ingredients she could find. She sang quietly to Chinedu as she worked, teaching him words, encouraging him to explore the small yard, to chase the chickens and play in the sun. "Look, Chinedu," she said one morning, pointing at a small row of sprouts. "These are our food. We planted them together. See how strong they grow." Chinedu clapped his tiny hands. "Grow, grow, grow," he shouted happily, his laughter ringing across the yard. Adaeze laughed too, the sound light and free, carrying across the village like a bird taking flight. She knelt beside him, brushing the sweat from his forehead. "Yes, my son. We will grow strong," she whispered. Her own heart felt lighter with every word, every smile. At night, she would sit outside the hut with Chinedu on her lap, looking at the stars. She no longer flinched at shadows. She no longer felt the constant ache of fear or the weight of Obinna's words pressing down on her. For the first time in years, she felt safe, in control, and alive. One afternoon, while harvesting some vegetables, Nkem came to check on her. "You are doing well, Adaeze," she said, smiling. "See how your garden grows. You are strong, even stronger than you think." Adaeze nodded, wiping her brow. "It feels good, Mama Nkem. I never realized I could do this on my own." The sun shone warmly on the village, and Adaeze laughed, a sound full of relief, hope, and joy. Chinedu ran past her, chasing a butterfly, his small feet kicking up dust. She watched him, her eyes softening, filled with pride. "We will be okay, my son," she whispered. "We will be more than okay." Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The garden flourished, the hut became cozy and welcoming, and Adaeze found work helping neighbors with their farms, learning more each day. She learned to repair fences, cook new recipes, and trade small goods at the market. She became part of the village, respected and loved for her kindness and diligence. One morning, as the sun rose and spilled golden light across her garden, Adaeze and Chinedu sat together, eating breakfast under the trees. Chinedu laughed as she fed him tiny pieces of fruit. Adaeze laughed with him, a clear, joyful sound that had not existed in her life for far too long. The warmth of the sun on her skin, the feel of her son's small hands in hers, the freedom to live without fear, it all filled her chest with something she had forgotten: peace. Her eyes, once haunted by pain and worry, now sparkled in the sunlight. She was free, she was strong, and she had rebuilt her life from nothing. And as Chinedu ran ahead, Adaeze followed, smiling, stepping into a future she had chosen for herself and for her child. The shadows of the past lingered only as distant memories, powerless against the light that now filled her heart. News traveled through the villages slowly at first, carried by market women, wandering children, and travelers resting by the streams. Each report arrived like a small, quiet whisper, growing louder as it reached Obinna. At first, he ignored it, brushing it off with the same pride and indifference he had carried for years. But the whispers became impossible to ignore. "They say Adaeze has settled in Ezegu village," one traveler told him, leaning over the fence of his compound. Her garden is full. She works the land, and the child, Chinedu, is strong and healthy. Obinna's face hardened, but he said nothing. "Is that so?" he muttered. His voice was low, almost bitter. "Yes, sir," the traveler continued. "And the villagers, they speak of her strength. How she manages everything alone, with the boy growing happy and clever. They say she is respected everywhere." Obinna did not answer. He walked slowly to the edge of his compound. Looking at the empty spaces she had left behind, the memories hit him in waves, the sound of her voice calling him for meals, her careful hands tending to him, the long hours she spent cleaning, cooking, and farming while he sat idly. He remembered the nights she cried silently, the sweat and tears she poured into his life, the bruises she hid. And for the first time, he saw the life he had taken for granted. He sank onto the worn wooden stool under the shade of the tree, the one she had always swept and polished. The air felt heavier than usual. He closed his eyes and saw her face in every shadow, the way she smiled despite exhaustion, the way she carried Chinedu with care. The soft light in her eyes when she believed love could save them both. She thrived, he whispered to himself, voice cracking. Without me, she thrived. His hands rested on his knees. He rubbed them slowly, as if trying to erase the memories, but they clung to him. He remembered her calling him for small things, cooking meals perfectly even as he scolded her, carrying firewood that he refused to lift, kneeling on the hard ground while he sat comfortably. Every act of devotion, every silent sacrifice, now replayed in his mind like a film he could not stop. "They say the boy is happy," he muttered again, staring at the empty path where she had left. "The boy is healthy, loved by her. Not me." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. Obinna got up and walked slowly through the compound. He touched the walls she had washed, the floor she had scrubbed until it shone, and he flinched as the memories stabbed him. He saw the little spaces where her hands had left traces, faint but undeniable. He sank back onto the stool, silent tears running down his cheeks. He thought about the first days of marriage, when she had overfed him palm wine to win his attention. He remembered the nights she spent working while he rested, the mornings she woke before dawn, the meals she cooked with trembling hands, the way she carried herself with hope despite his cruelty. And now, she was gone. She had chosen herself, chosen Chinedu, chosen a life that he could no longer touch. I lost her," he whispered, voice barely audible over the wind rustling through the trees. "I lost everything I had, because I did nothing." The compound felt empty. The walls echoed with the ghosts of laughter, cries, and whispered dreams. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ground. Obinna sat motionless, haunted by the woman who had sacrificed everything for him, the child he had never truly protected, and the life that might have been his if he had only loved. And in that emptiness, he realized too late that some losses cannot be undone, that some hearts, once broken, do not return, and that love alone, without care and respect, is never enough. Months had passed since Adaeze had left Obinna's compound. Life in the new village had become familiar, comfortable, and full of small joys. She had grown stronger, more confident. And the laughter of Chinedu had become the music of her days. Their days were long and full of work, but each task brought satisfaction. Each sunrise brought hope. Each night, under the stars, she felt peace she had never known in Obinna's house. One morning, Adaeze was walking to the small market with Chinedu, carrying a basket of freshly harvested vegetables. The sun hung low, casting long, golden beams across the dusty path. Chinedu skipped ahead, picking up little stones and examining them with curiosity, his laughter light and free. Adaeze followed slowly, her eyes scanning the horizon, the wind brushing her hair against her face. And then, in the distance, she saw him, Obinna, standing at the edge of a neighboring village, just far enough that she could see the anger, regret, and loneliness etched into his face. His posture was heavy, his shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on something far away, and for the first time, she realized what it was he was looking at. Chinedu ran up to her, holding a small tomato in his hand. "Mama, look," he said, his voice full of excitement. "I found this," Adaeze smiled, kneeling down to take his hand. She looked past him again, catching one last glimpse of Obinna. His face was drawn, hollowed by regret, the weight of his choices heavy upon him. Part of her heart ached, not for him, but for the wasted years. For the love she had given that had been met with cruelty. She straightened up, her back tall and proud. She spoke softly to Chinedu, who looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes. "Do you see that, my son?" she said, pointing in the distance without naming him. "That is the life we left behind. We do not need it. Our life is here, with the sun, with our hands, and with the work we love." Chinedu nodded, still holding her hand, and they continued walking. Adaeze's shadow stretched long before them, merging with the warm light of the rising sun. Every step was steady, deliberate, and free of fear. She felt the strength of her choices, the power of dignity, and the satisfaction of a life built on her own courage and resilience. As they walked through the village, neighbors waved, children ran past laughing, and the air smelled of fresh soil and sun-warmed leaves. Adaeze's heart lifted with every sound of life around her. She planted small seeds in the garden with Chinedu, teaching him to care for them, to nurture them as she had nurtured their new beginning. "Watch closely, my son," she said, guiding his little hands. "Care for them gently. Give them water. Give them sunlight. And just like these plants, we will grow stronger every day." Chinedu giggled, splashing water over the soil. "We grow strong, Mama." "Yes, we grow strong," Adaeze said, her voice steady, warm, full of hope. She looked up at the sunlight spilling over the horizon, bathing the village in gold, and she felt something she had never felt with Obinna: freedom. Real freedom. Peace. Joy. And as they continued walking, their shadows long and intertwined, Adaeze knew this was her triumph. She had chosen herself and her child. She had chosen respect, equality, and love that nurtured rather than broke. She had left behind pain, regret, and indifference, and she had built a life full of hope. For the audience, the lesson was clear: love alone is not enough. Love without care, respect, and equality can destroy even the strongest heart. But courage, dignity, and perseverance, these can build a life so bright that no one's regret, no matter how deep, can ever dim it. Adaeze smiled down at Chinedu. "Come, my son," she said. "The world is ours." And with the sunlight warming their path, mother and child walked on, stronger, freer, and filled with the quiet, unshakable triumph of a life truly reclaimed.